Hello, and welcome once more to Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Again with your favorite host, the one and only Cave Cat. Now we get to episode 32 in the series. For this one, you may recall how I reviewed several Disney animated shows and movies, ranging from The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Lion King, Adventures of the Gummy Bears, Recess, and especially the Toy Story films. Well, anyway, I'll be talking about an animated pilot that was produced by Disney that was originally supposed to get its own animated series, but never did, due to a combination of being met with low ratings and a poor decision on Disney's part. So what's the pilot? Fluppy Dogs. You might recall me mentioning this one briefly in my New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh review, but I'll talk more about it here. So, for those who don't know, Fluppy Dogs was actually a toy line that was created back in the 1980s and was created by Kenner. I mean, there were a lot of cartoons back in the 80s that were based off of toy lines, such as Rubik the Amazing Cube, Care Bears, Wuzzles, Popples, My Little Pony, Pound Puppies, Teddy Ruxpin, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and even Garbage Pail Kids, as I've mentioned earlier. Aside from plush toys of the Fluppies, there were also book and cassette read-alongs of the Fluppy Dogs, even co-produced by Disney themselves. However, when the animated pilot was produced, a lot of things were changed from the plush toys and especially the books. For one thing, the pilot introduced more of a sci-fi theme in an attempt to try and appeal more to boys, since the original toy line was more for girls. Another thing, while the original books focused more on the Fluppies having slice-of-life adventures in almost a similar vein as that of Pound Puppies, the pilot actually had the Fluppies traveling between worlds by the use of a crystal key in an attempt to try and return to their own world before ending up on Earth. From what I read, the concept of using a special key to travel to different worlds would later be used for that of the 90s sci-fi series Sliders. I have to admit, though, I never even heard of or seen Sliders until somewhere near the end of the 2000s, which I also never heard of Fluppy Dogs until that time period as well. But anyway, the pilot tells the story of the Fluppy Dogs, a group of brightly colored dog-like creatures who have been traveling between different worlds, thanks to a special crystal key, as mentioned before, until they end up on Earth. However, once they've arrived on Earth, they end up attracting the attention of a wealthy millionaire named J.J. Wagstaff, who strives to capture the Fluppies for himself, especially since he owns a huge menagerie of different animals. But anyway, the Fluppies, consisting of Stanley, Tippy, Ozzy, Bink, and Dink, end up coming into the presence of a young boy named Jamie, who wants a dog for his birthday, after his mother ends up getting Stanley from the pound, due to the fact that the Fluppies ended up getting taken there. I really like the concept of a strange otherworldly creature or creatures ending up in the company of a human child. Of course, the concept had been used before in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and especially in Alf, before Disney reused the concept in 2002's Lilo and Stitch. However, even in spite of the fact that Disney tried to make the concept of a group of anthropomorphic dog-like creatures traveling between worlds more marketable to kids, when said concept is based off an existing toy line, the pilot ended up not getting a lot of views, and there is a reason for that, which I'll get to a little bit later. But moving on, as I mentioned before in a lot of my previous reviews, the characters really bring a special charm to the pilot, with the main Fluppy Dogs themselves being the main characters that drive the plot along. Stanley appears to be the leader of the Fluppies, with a strong sense of bravery and adventure. Tippy is the matronly one of the group, as well as Stanley's second in command. Ozzy is the more laid-back Fluppy, who has the ability to literally sniff out portals to other worlds, and Bink and Dink are the brother-sister team who basically hold the group together. The human characters are also fine characters on their own. Jamie Bingham is basically what you would get if you took Christopher Robin from the Winnie the Pooh shorts and animated shows and Kevin from Adventures of the Gummy Bears and really tweaked their character traits slightly higher than usual. One thing I liked about him was the fact that he was voiced by the late Carl Steven, who would later go on to voice the young Fred Jones in a pup named Scooby-Doo, which I briefly talked about in my Scooby-Doo review. Claire is the older teenage girl who Jamie ends up teaming up with once she finds out what's going on involving the Fluppies. Though at first, she just came across as being the stereotypical clueless teenager who had no clue what was going on, but as the pilot went on, she gradually becomes a stronger character who is willing to help Jamie protect the Fluppies. Jamie's mother is unaware of what's going on involving the Fluppies, thinking that Jamie is just misbehaving. She's a little bit like Christopher Robin's mother from the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, being that she thinks that Jamie is just imagining things, similar to how Christopher Robin's mother thinks that Christopher Robin is imagining things as well. And as for the villains, we have J.J. Wagstaff, who is the wealthy millionaire who believes that he can get away with imprisoning innocent animals for his own gain. In some ways, he's almost like Duke Igthorn from Adventures of the Gummy Bears, which is funny since he's voiced by the same guy who voiced Igthorn. Hamish is Wagstaff's sycophantic butler who is almost like Smithers from The Simpsons, especially since Wagstaff and Smithers seem to be similar to that of Mr. Burns and Smithers, despite this pilot being released a few years before The Simpsons. So anyway, as I mentioned before, the Fluppy Dogs pilot aired back in 1986 and was supposed to get its own animated series, much like DuckTales, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck would later do. But unfortunately, unlike those four shows, Floppy Dogs was not successful enough to merit enough ratings from viewership to actually get a TV series. And like I said before, there's actually a reason for this. The thing is, this pilot actually aired on ABC in 1986 during the Thanksgiving weekend, whereas the pilots for DuckTales, Chip and Dale, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck aired on syndicated television. Because of this baffling decision made by the Walt Disney Television Company, as well as the network executives, not a lot of people were able to actually see the pilot due to being too busy during the Thanksgiving weekend, as well as the fact that not a lot of people were interested in watching a pilot based on a toy line that was aimed at girls. From what I heard, if the pilot had aired in syndication instead of on a local network, as well as on a different day, then maybe Fluppy Dogs would have had a better chance of garnering enough ratings and interest to actually culminate in getting its own animated series. In hindsight, it makes it even more infuriating that this never got the chance to spawn its own series, especially since Haskell Barkin, one of the writers for the pilot, actually went to the trouble of producing a show Bible that contains many details and structure points that would have been used in the series. For those who don't know, a show Bible is basically a reference document that screenwriters and executive producers use for information on the characters, plot, and world building of a TV series. A lot of shows that have been produced have Bibles that talk about the various details and rules entailing the plot of the show. But even in spite of this, as for the pilot itself, I actually find it to be rather decent. I mean, yeah, it does try to hype itself up as being somewhat akin to that of an animated sci-fi film, in stark contrast to the original toys and even the original books. But the quality can range from okay to mediocre. The animation is pretty amazing for an animated pilot, though then again it is done by Walt Disney Television Animation, so it's pretty much on the same level as that of the other Disney animated shows produced during the 80s and the early 90s. And even in spite of the fact that this never got a chance to actually spawn the animated series that would have come from this, at least it got some love and respect when it was reran on the Disney Channel from the late 80s to the mid to late 90s. I admit that this pilot does have its faults, such as the plot seeming rather convoluted and especially the decision to air it on ABC during Thanksgiving of 1986 instead of on syndication. However, I still find it a very captivating film once I got a chance to watch it on YouTube. It should be no surprise that even in spite of the problems that this pilot possesses, I will give Fluppy Dogs 7 stars. Much like what happened with the 1980s Garbage Pail Kids cartoon, it could have gotten the respect and recognition that it deserved to actually get an animated series. But alas, thanks to the Disney television division making the wrong decisions, the Floppy Dogs pilot ended up not getting the ratings that it needed from viewership. I mean, yeah, Wuzzles and Gummy Bears both aired on local networks, with the former airing on CBS and the latter airing on NBC before making the channel hop to ABC in 1989. But at least both shows were able to garner a lot of viewership and audience interest, even though Wuzzles only lasted for one season while Gummy Bears was able to last for 6 seasons. But with Floppy Dogs, a lot of people were unable to actually watch it thanks to spending too much time with their relatives during the Thanksgiving weekend, and not to mention a lot of people that did watch the special found the plot to be a bit too convoluted and rather pretentious, to say the least. Then again, if the producers would have made the pilot like the original book and audio read-alongs, then a lot of people would have possibly accused the special of trying to be a rip-off or a copy of the Pound Puppies animated series that was produced by Hanna-Barbera. So maybe it was best for Disney that they changed a few things from the books and the original plush toys in order to try and make Floppy Dogs its own story that was slightly different from that of Pound Puppies. But in the end, it was still a moot point, thanks to Floppy Dogs getting the shaft upon premiering on network television during Thanksgiving. Better luck next time, I guess. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. As mentioned before, be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more episodes or other videos from me. So until next time, later!